Okay, welcome to this latest teaching session on the course on technology and the future of medicine. Today we have a guest poet, and we may have a second one if the second poet finds us. And so that's kind of exciting. And the reason, why would we have a guest poet? That is because 8 days from now, a week from tomorrow, we're doing the future and all that jazz for the first time ever within the University of Alberta. We've done it all over the world, but never within the university where it started. So that's really exciting. Not only is it exciting, but it's free, and it's not just free poetry and science and music, it's also free pizza and soft drinks. So, man, how good is that? So that is from 4 to 7 p.m. on Friday the 25th. Upstairs in this building and the other end of the building, it's a large lecture hall. We'll spend 2 hours preparing that hall for you, so it'll have everything, including live streaming. You may have never been part of a live stream event before, but this could happen to you. So anyway, that's the reason we have poets here today. So the future and all that jazz originally, its theme was artificial intelligence safety. Now when I say those words, probably you get a sort of depressing feeling like you think, I would be interested in. Yeah, so what the initiative is for is to inform people about things that they intrinsically don't think they would actually ever be interested in hearing a lecture on, and informing them about it through sort of lateral thinking of entertainment, where they enjoy themselves for an evening surrounding this subject of science, and therefore come to learn something about it that otherwise they wouldn't know. So that's what's happening, and it would be really nice if we had enough people to eat all the pizzas. So, and I mean, if we don't, we can take some pizzas home. But anyway, I'm counting on you and your extended family of friends and stuff that maybe you can help us have more people in the audience on the 25th than we otherwise would. Okay, so the subject is going to be regenerative medicine. And we were the official entertainment for the Termis meeting. That is an international organization, Tissue Engineering Regenerative Medicine International Society, Termis. So in December 2017, we provided the entertainment, and we're planning to do that again this December. They seem to quite like it. So 2 years makes a big difference. In 2017, 2018, regenerative medicine seems to be in the ascendancy. People are actually interested in it. And in 2016, I was describing to students how those sessions at the meetings I went to, people always decided to go sightseeing instead of going to the session. So that was really, you see these fantastic regenerative medicine sessions with like 4 people there, one of whom was you know. So anyway, things have changed a bit, and so in 2017, there was a Regenerative Medicine Society that was a full partner with the Canadian Society of Transplantation in its annual meeting, and the meeting I run, the Banff meeting on transplant pathology, which is every 2 years. Our 2019 meeting, the pre-meeting, which is sort of the big featured day-long thing that starts the meeting, is going to be regenerative medicine, tissue engineering pathology. So you see, there's no escape from the subject we're talking about today. Whereas in the past, just a few years ago, there were many escapes, and everybody you knew was escaping along with you. And now this is becoming more or less mainstream. So in 2018, the Human Cell Atlas, which is individual cell transcriptomics, is poised to stealth revolutionize pathology and regenerative medicine via Facebook. And it was really cool. A few years ago, the annual pathology meeting is called the USCAP, United States Canadian Academy of Pathology. That year, I didn't go to it, and I stayed here and I gave a lecture on the Human Cell Atlas. And the people who did go to it, there was nothing in the entire meeting about this very exciting subject of the Human Cell Atlas. So this became kind of a thing with us that we were trying to figure out. I teach a course on the future of medicine with certain things that you can predict are a key part of the future of medicine, and regenerative medicine and the Human Cell Atlas are two of those. And why is it that the big meetings are specifically leaving everything about those things out of the meeting? So anyway, I'm not going to go into that in great detail. So the Human Cell Atlas project's characterization of all cells in the human body by single cell analysis, and it is both promoted and funded via social media. You know Chan Zuckerberg? Chan is the last name of Mark Zuckerberg's wife, right? So that's them. It's their money. They put their money into Human Cell Atlas. And so you can imagine there are a lot of self-respected scientists and physicians who would never be caught dead on Facebook and think anything that's on Facebook is not for them and not for civilized people. And so it comes as a big surprise that this is being promoted this way. It's also being promoted on NPR. Do you know that? National Public Radio. And on January 5th, there was a very mesmerizing presentation on NPR on the Human Cell Atlas by this woman pictured here, Aviv Regev. Now, we noticed something. So Sheeta Mogi and I and others went to the American Society of Nephrology meeting in October 2018. And Aviv Regev was identified as somebody giving a plenary talk there. So this promo is very interesting. It has 4 pictures and 4 names and 3 plenary talk titles. So they could bring themselves to admit she was going to give a plenary talk, but they could not say the words Human Cell Atlas Project. That somehow still caught in the craw of the people announcing the meeting. And it was very interesting. So we went there, we heard her, we talked with her afterwards. Okay, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Many of you may not really know much about this area, so there are 3 overlapping terms. One is regenerative medicine, one is tissue engineering, and one is cell therapy. And this is a Google Trends chart showing you how these things are faring over time. You can see that tissue engineering used to be big in the past and is a little bit less popular now. Regenerative medicine is sort of constant, and cell therapy is getting sexier by the day, and all sorts of people who have no idea what it means are using that term and so on. But what we're talking about today, those are the 3 terms under which it commonly goes. So what would be the impact of going the regenerative medicine route? So this is like a test question. What I'm saying, you are supposed to know this for the midterm. Maybe I'm being too specific about that, but that's the case. Okay, this is an important point. Transplantation today reaches only 10% of people who need organ replacement therapy. So that's kind of sad. It's true that transplantation does many wonderful things, and it's great for people who get the transplanted organs, but for a lot of reasons, the way it's done now, it will be very hard to ever have enough organs for everybody who needs a life-saving organ. So, in theory, regenerative medicine, which is able to make enough organs for everybody, like take a single cell and make an entire organ from it that's actually histocompatible with you. So worldwide, 1.2 million people are in need of transplantation for end-stage organ failure every year, and so regenerative medicine could save the remaining 90%, or over 1 million people annually. So that would be the impact if regenerative medicine, stem cell generated organs, stem cell generated repair, all those things, if they came into use. Regenerative medicine is, in a sense, already here. It works for tubular organs, bladder, trachea, esophagus, vagina, and to some extent, it works really well for bone and cartilage. Bone and cartilage may seem like more boring to you than other organs, but they're actually pretty important. And for some time now, it's been possible to like repair bone and cartilage using stem cell based therapies. Now, you're probably aware that we are off the US map, and we're the only major city in Canada that's off the US map, right? If you think of map of the US, and the maps are square, right? Countries aren't square, but maps are. So every major city in Canada except ours is on the US map. May give you the impression that you made a big procedural mistake in coming here and that nothing mainstream will ever reach you because you're sort of off the map. But that's not the case, and we have in Edmonton a lot of exciting stuff in the regenerative medicine area. And it's in two areas. It's people moving regenerative medicine forward, and it's also people looking at the negative side of regenerative medicine. Stem cell hype, stem cell fraud, stem cell tourism, where people leave Canada to go to a third world country where they get some poorly characterized stem cell concoction, and if they're a famous sports star or celebrity, they may have the impression that they got substantial benefit from this. They come back to Canada and all their fans the same thing. And that has a power you cannot imagine, that you think, well, we're all rational people and it shouldn't matter what sports stars and celebrities do, but that's not true. And so it's a tremendous effect. So Jane Shapiro in our Department of Surgery is lead investigator on stem cell generated cells that make insulin as a cure for type 1 diabetes. And then the other thing I've been talking about is stem cell tourism, stem cell fraud. Timothy Caulfield, who is an expert on celebrities and the celebrity impact on medicine and science. He's sort of a celebrity himself in that he has his own TV show, you probably know, and he hangs out with a lot of famous, well-known people as one of the best lecturers in the university. He's in the University of Alberta Health Law Institute, and these next few slides just show you some of the recent things. Exploiting science, systematic analysis of complementary alternative medicine, clinic websites, marketing of stem cell therapies, and so on. So a very good guy, and we can be very proud that he is here at the University of Alberta, and the work that he's doing in this area really has no peer worldwide. He is like the best guy studying this sort of thing. Stem cell publications, and if you think about this from the regulatory agency point of view, Health Protection Canada and the FDA in the States, they're focusing more on the harm that these poorly documented stem cell clinics are doing than practically any other issue. So it's a very resource intensive, that's what they're doing to try to protect you as a member of the general public, and it's something that's very much needed. Even if you're not particularly interested in this area, you're probably aware of people who have received injections that were supposed to be stem cells that were supposed to do something good, and instead they created tumors or, calcification or some sort of dread infectious disease arose or something. So there are many bad things that can happen in those clinics. On the other hand, people have this belief that, physicians are hiding all the good stuff, like there's a, conspiracy, and we're all, linked in this, conspiracy, and there are all these desirable therapies that traditional medicine is standing in the way of, and, if you can only get to one of these clinics, all sorts of miraculous cures will be coming your way. So these are all slides about recent publications. So it's interesting that in my area of medicine, which is kind of renal medicine and transplantation, I wonder if that is our other poet saying, how do I find you? Just a second here. I apologize for this. Okay. Right. So, so those fields that are kind of my field, kidney medicine, transplant medicine, you may wonder how those fields stack up amongst the other fields of medicine, right? So when I started, they were at the top, man. They were the most desirable, and the coolest people, the best and the brightest young people went into those fields. And it was said that, like, transplant surgeons at parties could identify other transplant surgeons because there's an excellent, extra bounce in your step, and everybody can just see when a transplant surgeon enters the room at a party that he's here, and so or she's here. It's really cool, right? But this has not continued, and unfortunately today most young people do not choose to go into those fields, and it used to be only North American young people, but pretty much it's kind of worldwide that these are not desirable fields. And there is a good chance with stem cell therapies, the luster of those fields, my favorite fields, will come back because there's great potential for wonderful stuff to happen there. And so it's kind of humorous or a joke, but kind of true too, that one can predict that as regenerative medicine moves forward, that the status of transplanting organs in general will rise, and the status of kidney medicine. So we'll be able to reverse those trends, and way to think about this is you are part of the we. A lot of the stuff we're talking about today you could actually play a role in. Now, we've talked about Moore's Law before, and you may have had the impression that we'll all be out of work at some point, right? That robots will be able to do everything better than us, right? And so those of us who write poetry and stuff, that'll be great, because you'll be able to do that a whole day, and you'll get some sort of guaranteed annual income for writing poetry. So for poets, it's a good future, but maybe not so much for other people. But what this slide says, and it's partly humorous, but it, I guess, could occur, is that the regenerative medicine generated kidney is really the moonshot. It's harder than making other organs. And because of that, possibly, kidney physicians and kidney pathologists may be employed way longer than other humans because we need their human skills with this very complex area. Why is the kidney harder to make than other organs? The liver, for instance, has a bunch of cells that do something useful even in a random arrangement. Like if you just mix up the cells and provide them with nutrients so they live, they do metabolic things that are good for the host. Whereas the kidney is sort of a series kind of thing. It's not parallel, it's series. So you have to have like this kind of cell before this kind of cell. It has to be a tube leading you from the filter down this, you know, osmotic gradient and out into the bladder and so on. So it's a more detailed mandatory arrangement of cells than is necessary in other organs. You know, if you think about the thyroid, for instance, not only is the thyroid, does it do something useful if you mix up all the cells and just keep them alive, but it can be replaced by a pill, right? I mean, oh, yeah, wow. Well, the kidney cannot be replaced by a pill, and it doesn't do well. You just randomly mix up the cells. So I have come up with the idea of a new Banff classification of tissue engineering pathology, following up on the classification that I created 28 years ago, Banff classification of kidney transplant pathology. So every 2 years we meet to update this. And you may think, well, there's nothing better than to hear about that classification from the guy who created it. However, I beg to differ. I think I'm a little bit too close to the subject, so you would also be interested, what do young people your own age who are in the field think? And so this next slide, Ben Adam, who's just joined our faculty, when you ask him about the Banff classification, this is what Ben Adams says, that it gives the imprimatur that you know what you're doing. Like, if you talk about kidney transplant pathology without mentioning the Banff classification, or without giving the Banff classification scores, kind of gives the impression that you might not know what you're doing, and once you invoke Banff, then people think that you do know what you're doing. So from a young person's point of view, that's what Banff is, and these are some of the milestones of it over the years. Still have video and sound recordings from the first conference. Not that you were worried about that, but you may imagine I'm video intensive enough that I was worried about it. And these are the number of citations of Banff papers over the years, and so on and so forth. And tissue engineering pathology will be added soon. This is the Banff process, so it is a consensus generating process. Now just think about that for a moment. Do any of you know what is the accepted way of generating consensus? You probably know that you need a professional facilitator. And if we were going to generate consensus in this room, a professional facilitator would come in, give us a little spiel about a new way to think. And he'd be carrying a lot of Post-it notes. We put a lot of Post-it notes in various arrangements around the room and work for maybe an hour or two and come up with a new concept of whatever we're working on. And that's the way consensus is supposed to work. We have never done that. So we've had people who actually know the field So the thing about the professional facilitator, they know a lot about consensus, but nothing about the field, right? So the idea of why you wouldn't want an expert in the field to be generating consensus is there's too much at stake. Like if there's a war between countries or something, that's probably true. But in this area, there's not that much at stake. People are not actually killing each other over issues here, and so on. You can imagine an expert actually moderating consensus. So that's what I have done, and it's kind of cool that the NIH, National Institutes of Health in the US, used to do consensus conferences. And people were gaming the system. They would get together in a small group in an obscure room and decide what consensus they want the next consensus conference to. And then, well, how can we do that? How can we make this look spontaneous, right? So they all go there with a little cheat sheet of what the endpoint's supposed to. And the NIH could not figure out a way to keep people from doing that, so they gave up consensus conferences. And now if you go to the NIH, say, we want to do a consensus conference, they say, we don't do that. Talk to the Banff people. So we're this little tiny entity that succeeded with the consensus conferences where this huge entity of the NIH couldn't. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so these are some of the people involved, and this is a collection of pictures. It's been quite an interesting journey. Okay, the latest meeting was in Barcelona, the next one is in Pittsburgh. So in the Barcelona meeting, we started talking about adding tissue engineering pathology to our mandate. So it's no longer just allograft transplantation. In other words, taking unrelated organs from people not genetically identical to you and putting them into you, and so you have to be treated with anti-rejection agents and so on. But also a new world in the future of having organs genetically identical to you put in that you're not going to reject. But there are other challenges, one of which is that it's very hard with stem cell generated organs to make sure to get all the right cells in all the right places. So you'll get better and better. So the world is changing rapidly, and one thing that indicated that, this is the most prestigious journal in transplantation, American Journal of Transplantation. And when this Building New Hearts appeared on the cover, it suggested that regenerative medicine was kind of getting close to the mainstream. Whereas a lot of the readers of this journal never thought that would ever happen in the history of the universe. So this was like kind of a big shock. And with any dramatic change in any area of science, there's always a question about how real is the change and is it really here yet, and so on. So all those questions still apply, but we are thinking of concepts like this, of cells in scaffolds with bioactive factors that then create either organs, whole organs, or organoids, which are like little collections of cells, the same kinds of cells as in the whole organ. And to some extent, organoids can be useful because you can test toxicities on them, but it's also possible that with time, we'll be able to scale organs of all different sizes. If the usual organ is this size, we can also have one that functions pretty well at like 1/10 that size. And if you're going to do something really unusual in the world where you need some organ to be much more powerful than a normal human organ, we could you can also make that. Like particularly with vision, you would be aware, first of all, vision is like your most sensitive sense. You are more critical of what you're seeing than practically anything else, certainly more than what you're hearing or what you're feeling, so on. But for some time now, there have been cameras that are considerably better than the human eye. And we're going to reach a point where you're going to have psychological decisions to make about whether you're just going to be a boring person keeping your own eye or whether you're going to get this new eye that's like 1,000 times better and can see, 50 miles away as clearly as right there and so on. So that is going to be a thing very soon, that there are cameras that are way better than the human eye and that can be implanted, and at first it's people whose own eyes don't work who will get these, but just like Oscar Pistorius's leg and all that kind of thing. And that's what we started with on the first day, is what will medicine do when all the current diseases have been cured or easily prevented? So it will be human enhancement, not only physical, moral, spiritual. So at some point, you may think it's beyond your lifetime, but it's probably not. There'll be a lot of important moral decisions to be made about human enhancement. So that's one of the reasons about the importance of ethics in this course. All right, so the world is changing rapidly, and this graphic of jump starting, I'm willing to start removing this slide as soon as people tell me we don't need it anymore. But we probably do need it at the moment. In other words, in every audience is somebody who believes that what I'm talking about is really not relevant to the world that they're living in, isn't going to happen, so on and so forth. The world is changing rapidly. Soon we are going to be thinking about all these processes shown here as part of creating stem cell generated organs. Does the Canadian public want this? Yes, they do. So Canadian support for radical life extension resulting from advances in regenerative medicine is strong. And you can imagine, like the technological singularity I talked about in the first two lectures, there's something like that, which is when we get to a point where we can routinely create new organs by just taking an existing organ, flushing out the cells, keeping the scaffold, flushing in the cells of the person we want to give the organ to, having them grow up and go have the right place, cells go into exactly the right places and be all completely functional and so on. When that occurs, then it will be as big as the main technological singularity. In other words, there's an analogy between complete success in regenerative medicine and the point in time when machines are smarter than the whole aggregate human race. Both of those are like a big deal in the future, and they are both coming at some point. Maybe 2045, maybe sooner, maybe later. So, what happens when you infuse cells into a decellularized organ? Well, for instance, if you take the kidney, you end up with cells, some cells being in the right places, but some cells being in places they never ever would be. So podocytes are cells that are on the outside of glomerular capillaries in the filtering unit of the kidney, the glomerulus. And when you decellularize a kidney and then recellularize it, you end up with some podocytes out in the interstitium, the space between the tubules, a place where they would never ever be in a normal kidney. So lots of other things like that. And so what would be your deciding point that a stem cell generated organ is good enough to be transplanted into somebody or is not? So that's kind of the essence of tissue engineering pathology, the idea of having a classification so we can figure that out. Is this organ good enough? We're realizing we can never make it perfect, but is the net benefit going to be sufficient that we should actually put this in somebody or not? So the many problems with stem cell generated organs not being discussed. Do not exclude yourself from the action in this area. In other words, whatever is your area of interest, you could contribute by making that part of the science, preparing for the future world of regenerative medicine. And so it isn't the kind of thing where you're just going to sit back and wait till it happens. Say, well, gee, I'm so glad that it's now here. Like, you could probably actually do something to help make it happen. Many problems with stem cell generated organs not being discussed. And so many old-fashioned questions. Like in school, even up to this point, you probably think you have learned things that are useless, that are a part of courses you've taken, but won't help you at all in the future, right? And this is a concern because your time is valuable, right? So it turns out that many of those old-fashioned questions that people thought were sort of like so last century, who would care now? In the stem cell generated organ, they become interesting all over again. So that may make your previous education more relevant than you realized. Who knew, eh? So we will need BAMF foundations for allograft pathology, BAMF meetings, adapting to this future changes in the field of transplantation. It's okay to allow the natural resistance of change and nostalgia for the past to motivate you. So you may think that you'll be ostracized in science if you have nostalgia for the past because everybody is forward-looking, but this is an area where looking back at actually is necessary from time to time. So we're at the very beginning, nothing wrong with that. Richard Feynman, maybe the most famous scientist ever lived. We are at the very beginning of time for the human race. Our responsibility is do what we can, learn what we can, improve the solutions, and pass them on. Yeah. So anyway, this idea, we're just at the start of a very glorious future, and we can each do things ourselves to make it more glorious. Why not? Yeah. So, yeah. So, this is what a stem cell generated rodent kidney looks like now. You've got all these multiple interconnecting paths in the tubules that do not normally occur, and cells in the wrong places, and some other bizarre things. And so you could say, can you call this a kidney? But of course it's a kidney. I mean, it's got glomeruli, tubules, you know, it's got the main components. They're just not quite right, you know. So rather than taking the easy way out, saying, I declare this is not a kidney, you can help us figure out how to make it better. And that's what the future is. So, you may wonder about these pencil sketches. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if any of you do art. So I reached the point where I needed to have art for this paper on tissue engineering pathology. And the student, very much like one of you, Corey Fung, said, I can draw. I said, well, okay, well, I want you to make sketches of these things. And when we submitted the paper, we said, we intend for these pencil sketches to be replaced by professional artist art. And we wrote that multiple times. We were about as upfront and in your face about it as we could be, but the editor didn't really notice or didn't want to notice either one. So the pencil sketches are in the article. So Corey Fung is like famous forever, even though that was never our intent in the beginning. So anyway, so let's just talk for a moment about the Future and All That Jazz event. What I feel about it is that it falls in a humorous way in between humor and kind of mainstream acceptance. If a scientific idea has mainstream acceptance, it doesn't need the attention of the future and all that jazz. I mean, it doesn't need poets, musicians singing its praises because people will sit still for a lecture, right? But the other interesting thing is about humor, that if you go to a performance where humor is the main object, and if there's some science there, I think you will not learn very much. Those of you who have watched the Big Bang Theory, so think of how much you really learn from that. You've been entertained, but you likely have, and you heard some terms, but yeah, you probably didn't actually learn anything. So our approach is better than pure humor. Anyway, that's my theory about it. Even though there have been some humorists who have said that like some humorists with science background who have said that they feel that humor is a natural part of every important area of science and of science teaching. So what do you think? Can you think of an instance where you watched a purely humorous performance or show where you actually learned a lot of science from that? Does that happen to you?
Bill
Yes.
Nye.
What?
Bill Nye, the science guy.
Oh.
Like in some of his new stuff.
Yeah, no, but I mean, isn't his intent is to teach, right? To teach it in a humorous way. I mean,